Right now I'm reading The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is Book 7, A Judicial Error, page 895. It's got a subtitle, A Historical Survey. The opinion of the medical experts sought to prove to us that the defendant is not in his right mind and a maniac. I assert that he is in fact perfectly in his right mind, but that this is the worst thing of all. Had he not been in his right mind, then he might perhaps have been turned out to have far more brains. As regards the opinion that he is a maniac, then with this I would concur, but only on one point, the same one to which the examination drew our attention, namely the defendant's view of the 3,000 which had supposedly been withheld from him by his father. It may, nonetheless, be possible to discover a point of view incomparable, closer to hand, in order to explain this customary frenzy of the accused in connection with that money, and then his leaning towards insanity. For my part, I fully agree with the opinion of the young physician who had found that the defendant enjoys and has enjoyed complete and normal mental faculties, but has merely been angry and embittered. In this lies the heart of the matter. Not only in the 3,000, not in a sum of money did the object of the defendant's constant and frenzied embitterment lie, but in the fact that there was here a particular reason that aroused his anger. That reason was jealousy. So the narrator likes to go on this long rant, so you gotta kind of bear with it throughout the book. At this point, Ippolit Kirillovich extensively unrolled the entire picture of the defendant's fateful passion for Grushenka. He began right from the moment when the defendant had set off to see the young person in order to beat her unmercifully, to use the defendant's own words. Ippolit Kirillovich explained. But instead of beating her unmercifully, he remained at her feet. There is the beginning of this love. At the time, the old man, the defendant's father, also casts an eye upon the same young person. A remarkable and fatal coincidence, for the two hearts were kindled suddenly. At the same time, though, previously both one and the other had known and maintained acquaintance with this person, and these two hearts were kindled with the most unrestrained, the most Karamazovian passion. I guess that's how you say it, Karamazovian? Yeah. Here we have her own confession. I, she says, laughed at the one as at the other. Yes, she said suddenly. She had suddenly conceived a wish to laugh at the one and at the other. Previously, she had not so wished. But suddenly this attention had slipped into her mind, and the upshot of it was that both fell vanquished before her. The old man worshipped money as though it were God, immediately got ready 3,000 rubles to give to her, merely in exchange for visiting his abode, but was soon reduced to a point where he would have considered it happiness to place at her feet his name and all his fortune, if only she would agree to become his lawful spouse. Of this we have firm testimony. And as for the defendant, well, his tragedy is plain to see. It is before us. But such was the game played by the young person. To the unhappy young man, the seductress did not even hold out any hope. For hope, genuine hope, was granted him only at the very last moment, when he, down before his tormentress on his knees, stretched out to her his hands already steeped in the blood of his father and rival. In that position, namely, too, was he arrested. Send me together with him into penal servitude. It was I who pushed him to it. I am more guilty than any, this woman herself cried out, by now in sincere remorse, at the moment of his arrest. The talented young man who has taken it upon himself to write a description of the case before you, that same Mr. Rakitin, to whom I have already referred, defines in one or two compressed and characteristic phrases the character of this heroine. Heroine? Heroine. Heroine. I don't know how to pronounce that. An early disillusionment and an early deception and fall. A betrayal by the seducer who was her betrothed, betrothed, and who abandoned her. Then poverty, the curse of a decent family, and, at last, the patronage of a certain wealthy old man whom she, as a matter of fact, even now considers her benefactor. Within her young heart, which may perhaps have contained much good within it, anger was harbored from all too early an age. A calculating character was formed, one that stored up capital. A derisiveness and vengefulness towards society were formed. After this characterization, it may be grasped that she was capable of laughing at the one and at the other solely for the sake of a game, a malicious game. And now in this month of hopeless love, of moral downfalls, of betrayal of the one to whom he was betrothed. I gotta search up how to say that, man. Of pocketing another's money that had been entrusted to his honor, the defendant, in addition to that, attains a state almost of frenzy, a rabid fury, because of constant jealousy, and of whom? His father. And to crown it all, the crazy old man is enticing and trying to seduce the object of his passion, with that same 3,000 that his son considers his own, native inheritance from his mother, and which he holds against his father. Yes, I concur. That was hard to endure. In such a situation, even mania might appear. Not in money lay the heart of the matter, but in the fact that with the same money his happiness was with such loathsome cynicism being smashed to smithereens. After this, Ippolit Kirillovich passed to the subject of how the thought of parricide had gradually arisen within the defendant, and retraced it by the evidence. At first we merely go shouting about the inns. We do it all that month. Oh, we like to pass the time among people, and to waste no time in telling those people everything, even our most infernal and dangerous ideas. We like to confide in people. We not know why. At once, immediately demand that those people at once respond to us with the most complete sympathy, enter into all our cares and anxieties, say yes to us, and raise no hindrance to our disposition. Otherwise, we shall grow angry and wreck the whole inn. There followed the anecdote concerning second-grade Captain Snegiryov, I guess. Those who saw and heard the defendant during that month felt, at least, that now not only cries and threats against the father might be involved, but that in such a frenzy those threats might well pass into action. At this point, the public procurator, I gotta learn how to say that, described the family meeting at the monastery, the defendant's conversations with Alyosha, and the shocking scene of violence in the father's house when the defendant had burst in upon him after dinner. It is not my intention to insist, Ippolit Kirillovich went on, that before this scene the defendant had already, of malice prepense, decided to bring about his father's end by murdering him. Nonetheless, this idea had already come up within his mind several times, and he had given it careful deliberation, for that we have evidence, witnesses, and his own confession. I confess, gentlemen of the jury, Ippolit Kirillovich adjoined to this remark, that even today I have hesitated to impute to the defendant the complete and conscious premeditation of the crime that was suggesting itself to him. I have been firmly convinced that his soul had already more than once contemplated the fateful moment in advance, but only contemplated it, envisaged it, only as lying within the realms of possibility, but had yet determined neither the term nor the circumstances of its execution. But my hesitation lasted only until today, until the appearance of this fateful document, presented to the court by Miss Verkhovtseva. Dude, you try to say it. Verkhovtseva. You yourselves, gentlemen, heard what she exclaimed. It is the plan, it is the program of the murder. Thus did she describe the unhappy defendant's unhappy drunken letter. And indeed, behind this letter there lies all the import of a program and premeditation. It was written 2 whole days before the crime, and in this way it is now definitely known to us that that 2 whole days before the execution of his terrible design, the defendant declared with an oath that if he did not obtain the money upon the morrow, he would kill his father with a view to taking the money from under his pillow, in the envelope with the red ribbon. If only Ivan has gone away. You hear? If only Ivan has gone away. Here. In other words, it was all considered. The circumstances were weighed up. And what do we see? The whole thing was subsequently executed as if out of a book. Its premeditated and deliberate nature are beyond all doubt. The crime was to be committed for the purpose of robbery. That has been unequivocally declared. That has been written and assigned. The defendant does not disclaim the presence of his signature. It will be said. these things were written by a man who was drunk. But that provides no extenuation, and is all the more important. While in a drunken state, he wrote that he had conceived while in a sober one. Had it not been conceived in a sober one, it would have been written in a drunken one. It will perhaps be said, why did he go about the inns shouting off his intentions? Anyone who determined on such a deed with premeditation would say nothing and keep it to himself. True. But he went and did... Dude, this guy is like making an argument and also making a counter-argument against that argument by himself. This is pretty intense. True, but he went and did this shouting when as yet he had no plans or forethoughts, but when there was in him but a certain desire, the mere maturing of an urge. Later he did less shouting about it. On the evening that this letter was written, having got drunk in the capital city inn, he was, contrary to habit, taciturn, did not play billiards, sat to one side, spoke to no one, and merely drove the assistant of one of our local merchants from his seat, but this almost unconsciously, out of a custom of quarrelling, without which now upon entering an inn he could no longer dispense. To be sure, together with his final resolution, there must also have occurred to the defendant the apprehension that he had, as preliminarily done, too much shouting around the town, and that this might greatly serve towards his conviction and prosecution when he carried out his design. But what was to be done? The fact of the publicity was now achieved. It could not be unmade, and if a lucky chance had rescued us before, so might it also now. We pinned our hopes upon our star, gentlemen. I am obliged, moreover, to admit that he did much to avoid the fateful moment, that he used a most considerable degree of effort in attempting to evade the bloody outcome. Tomorrow I will obtain it from all men, he writes in his curious language, and if men will not give it... Okay, so this is what Dmitri said in his letter, and I think the judge is reading the letter. So this is the judge's voice, but he's trying to sound like Dmitri. And if men will not give it me, then blood shall be spilt. Written. So this is the judge now. Written, likewise, in a drunken state, and likewise executed in a sober state, as if out of a book. Here, Ippolit Kirillovich, so back to the narrator, proceeded to a detailed description of Mitya's endeavors to obtain money for himself, so as to avoid the crime. He described Mitya's adventures at the house of Samsonov, his journey to see Lyagavy, all of it from the documentary evidence. Exhausted, mocked, hungry, having sold his watch for that journey, while nonetheless carrying 1,500 rubles upon his person, and apparently, tormented with jealousy on account of the object of his love, whom he had been abandoned in the town, suspecting that in his absence she would go to Fyodor Pavlovich, his dad. He returns at last to the town. Thanks be to God, she has not been to see Fyodor Pavlovich. He himself escorts her to her protector Samsonov. It is a strange fact that we are not jealous of Samsonov. And this is highly characteristic of psychological feature of this case. After that he rushes back to his observation post at the rears. And there, he learns that Smerdyakov is in a fit of the falling sickness. The other manservant ill. The way is clear, and the signals are in his hands. What temptation! Nonetheless, in spite of it all, he puts up some resistance. He goes to see the temporary resident of our town, so highly respected by us all, Mrs. Koklakova. There's a full stop after that. Having long regarded his fate with compassion, this lady offers him the most reasonable of counsels, to give up all this excess, this scandalous love, these idlings about the inns, this fruitless waste of his young strength, and to set off for Siberia, to the gold mines. There is the issue for your raging energy, your Romanesque character that craves adventure. Having described the upshot of the conversation, and the moment when the defendant suddenly received the news that Grushenka had not spent any time at Samsonov's at all, having described the momentary frenzy of the unhappy, jealous man whose nerves had been exhausted, at the thought that she had indeed deceived him now, there at the house of Fyodor Pavlovich, Ippolit Kirillovich concluded, directing attention to the fateful role played by the chance. Had the serving maid had time to tell him that his beloved was in Mokroy with her former and, beyond dispute, nothing would have ever happened. But she was taken aback with fear, began to vow and swear to God, and if the defendant did not murder her there and then, it was because he had gone dashing off headlong after the woman who betrayed him. Observe, however, no matter how beside himself he may have been, he did nonetheless take the brass pestle with him. Why a pestle in particular? Why not some other instrument of murder? Well, if for an entire month we have been contemplating this scene and preparing for it, as soon as anything resembling a weapon flits before our gaze, we seize it as our weapon, and that some object of this kind might serve as an instrument of murder, that we have already envisaged for an entire month. That was why we so instantly and incontrovertibly recognized it as such. And so the fact remains that it was by no means unconsciously, by no means involuntarily, that he seized this fateful pestle. And so here he is in his father's orchard. The way is clear. There are no witnesses, but dead of night, murk, jealousy. The suspicion that she is here with him, her rival, in his embrace, and possibly laughing at him at that moment, takes his breath away. And indeed, it is not only a suspicion. What suspicions can there be now? For the deception is manifest, plain to see. She is there, right there in the room from which the light is coming. She is in there with him behind the screen, and now the unhappy man steals over to the window, peeps deferentially in, docilely resigns himself, and prudently withdraws, so as to get away as quickly as possible from trouble, in case something dangerous and immoral happens. And this is what they would have us believe. We know who the character of the defendant, who understand the condition of mind he was in, a condition that is known to us from the evidence, and above all in possession of the signals, by means of which he could at once unlock the house and enter. That was a long sentence. Here, in connection with the signals, Ippolit Kirillovich let his prosecution rest for a while, deeming it necessary to enlarge on the question of Smerdyakov, with the purpose of exhausting completely this entire introductory episode concerning the suspicion that Smerdyakov was guilty of the murder, and to put pay to the idea once and for all. This he did most thoroughly, and everyone realized that, in spite of all the contempt he had expressed towards his supposition, he nonetheless viewed it as highly important. So that was it. That was the small section, page 895 to 900. Thanks for listening.